Working as a pizza delivery person is dull most of the time. You drive, you deliver, people just want to quickly exchange the cash and go. Occasionally, you get the chatty person where talking to the delivery person is the highlight of their day. Then you need to dismiss yourself before the pizza gets cold and you're late to get back to work. Then there's the rules. Rule number 1. Don't open the pizza box unless the customer insists, under any circumstances. The order is written on the box, and you don't need to check. Rule number 2. Don't eat orders that don't get picked up. They go right into the garbage. Rule number 3. Don't ask so many questions about the higher turnover of pizza delivery people. The third one was the most unspoken. No matter though, I followed all the rules to a T, every single time. That is, until that one night. That terrifying night when... I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's how that night started. I was delivering pizza. Yeah, I know, a big surprise there. But unlike most days, I was kind of hoping there would be a no-show, and I might just pay for the pizza myself and scarf it down in the van. It was out in a rural area, so I thought it would be easy to pull over on the shoulder. I hadn't gotten a single chance to eat all day, and it was 9 in the evening already. I followed rule number 2 for the 9 months I'd worked for Domino's, so I deserved one cheat, right? And the company wouldn't even be down any money, because I intended to pay. Okay, we were in agreement. I had no bad intention. I crossed my fingers and hoped no one would answer the door. I walked up to the front door, my fingers still crossed. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. Maybe it was just my stomach adding Halloween sounds to the scenery, but the whole thing was kind of eerie. The next houses were so far away, I couldn't even see them. Rural areas, am I right? And this house? Way too big, even if a family all lived in there. The full moon didn't help matters either. I knocked again. No one answered. I'd already been outside for a couple minutes, so I figured it would be fine to just call them and see if they were there. No one picked up, though I could hear the phone ringing on the inside. This house was far away, so if I were going to scarf down the pizza, I'd need some extra time. As I walked away, I left a message on the answering machine. Hello, this is Ben with Domino's Pizza. I arrived at your house at 9:03, but no one answered the door. Sorry I missed you. Your delivery was taken back to the store. Thank you for ordering. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. When I made it back to the delivery van, I felt so naughty. You know, that sense you get when you're about to break the rules, but it's not even really going to be so bad. Still, our boss had told us to not even open the boxes ourselves in the van. As a matter of fact, we weren't even allowed to see the pizzas unless the customer opened the box first. Just as my fingertips touched the lid, my phone chimed and announced a new text message. Bring the pizza back, we're hungry. Oh well, so much for eating it myself. Fine, this was a job. I would do it. And I would paste a smile on my face, even though I'd be hangry the entire time. Of course, the walk back to the front door this time was much more eerie than the first time. For one thing, everything seemed to have gotten darker, and I think there might have been dogs in the distance. Twigs started crunching on the ground. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, it started getting louder and louder, and something ran across my path, running on 4 legs. In fear, I dropped the pizza. What the hell were the toppings on this? It looked like human fingers, covered with thick, brown paste I could only assume was dried and cooked blood. In the bushes, I saw eyes glowing in the dark. All logic tells me that you shouldn't run when wild animals are looking at you. They'll chase you. In the moment, running is all I could think of doing. Scratch that. You don't think. You act. And that's what I did. At least 3 of them must have followed me as I ran fast towards the van. I'd gotten a bit of a head start, which was enough to open the door. Closing the door was another issue. One of the beasts got its head stuck, too big for words, pitch black fur, and sharp teeth bearing them at me in fury. No, no, no! All I could do was kick it in the face and hope its head would pop out so I could just close the door. But things were too disorienting. The barking, The other beasts scratching at the van, the growling in hunger, and the jaws which open and close, threatening to eat me alive. I was saved by a howling in the distance. The beast left, and I shut the door as quickly as I could. In my rearview mirror, I could see the beast scarfing down the pizza, while a tall man stood over them. His face was briefly illuminated by a cell phone screen as I drove away. I read a text message. Sorry for my pets. They were hungry. Whatever. Just whatever. On my way back to Domino's, my mind raced with drawing connections. Why we weren't allowed to look at the pizzas or eat the ones that were undelivered. The human fingers. The beasts. That night I told my boss I was quitting. Or I wasn't allowed to leave until my boss checked my foot. I hadn't even noticed that the beast had bitten me. Adrenaline, I guess. Nodding, my boss explained he understood. On my way out, sporting a limp because of the bite, my boss said if I ever wanted pizzas in the future, they would be on the house. If this was a bribe to keep quiet, it was a weak one, that's for sure. All this went down about a month ago, during the last full moon. I hope you'll believe me. Please, please, please believe me. My story starts at Domino's Pizza. You know, one of those franchise locations that's been around for far too long, and it's basically become its own entity. The blue and red sign outside looking brand new, claiming brand loyalty. But inside the store, the tiles looked like they'd been there since the 80s. You know who else had been there since the 80s? Dave. He was the friendliest man who could ever run a pizza place. At least that's what you'd think when you're a kid. You know how it is when you're 4. He gives you extra breadsticks, he's the best guy in the world, and your parents tell you to thank him. He asked about school, about your family, about everything. And you fill him in while your parents are over your shoulder, making sure you brag about your accomplishments. He asks for a hug, so your parents tell you to hug him, so you're not being rude. You grow older and it grows weirder asking for hugs, so he just starts telling you you're beautiful. But all the grown-ups tell you you're beautiful, so it doesn't mean anything from Dave until you're 15 and starting to realize some older men are nice people. Older men are Dave. I first got the sense of it when I was 15 and going with a couple friends to celebrate my birthday. It was my first time going to this man's Domino's without my parents. Dave seemed much more interested in my life than when my parents were there. The questions were much more probing. He wanted to know who my friends were. He asked if boys were giving me any trouble. Did I have a boyfriend? He told me I was beautiful. The same as usual, no big deal. And all that was before he found out it was my birthday and told us all the pizzas were on the house. He seemed a little too excited, and a little too familiar. He would come over to our table every 5 minutes to check up on us. When he left, my friends would joke about him liking me. You know, like. As I was leaving, he went and opened the door for me, one hand holding the door, the other hand pressing on my lower back. I could feel the fingertips gently digging into my spine. I walked out of there feeling uncomfortable, but I talked myself out of it. Bad feeling, but hadn't technically done anything, you know? Besides, my friends were all joking. If it were dangerous, would they all be joking about it? Well, I put it to the back of my mind. I was successful until about 2 months later. One cold October day. Heavy rain. Heavy enough, many places were shut down. Hiding under a canopy, I took a call from my dad. Can you pick up some Domino's on the way home? I already placed an order. I nodded into the phone, even though my father couldn't see. Okay. You know that feeling when your muscles all turn to jelly when you walk, but you keep moving anyway? You know that muscular sensation when your body says danger, turn around, but your mind says stop being silly, just pick up the pizza. The bell on the door rang to announce I had arrived. Dave was already standing in the till. Wow, long time no see. I missed you, he called while I gave him a half-hearted laugh. I'm here to pick up my order, I tried to say, though it came out as a question. Dave told me it would take a while, so I should sit down, which I did, pulling out my phone. Even though I wasn't big on texting, I figured it would give the impression I didn't want to talk. I knew that at least, even if I couldn't pinpoint the reason at the time. First, Dave sat in front of me and commented on kids with their cell phones. He practically invited himself to the table I was waiting at. Was I still taking dance classes? Where had I been? Did I have a good birthday? Several curt answers later, he had to tend the till. Second, after I put on my headphones, he tapped on the table until I heard him. Do you have a boyfriend? What grade are you in? How are you doing in school? Third, after I put my head down on the table and pretended to be asleep, I heard him go back to the room and tell something to one of his employees. Within a couple of minutes, I heard the front doorbell ring, and I figured my play dead move was working. That is, until I felt his hand on my shoulder, waking me. I lifted my head. Sorry, I'm just so tired, I said, lying, of course. Dave asked if I wanted to see the kitchen, where all the behind-the-scenes action happened. Sorry, I'm just so tired, I said again. He insisted. He really insisted. Your parents wouldn't want you to be so rude, he said, and even though it was playful, I felt the little 4-year-old in me, the one that went and hugged him even though I didn't want to, just because it would be rude if I didn't. Well, just a couple more minutes until my pizza was finished. What was the harm? The jelly feeling in my leg turned to numbness. Nothing bad had happened though, so why was I worried? The kitchen was big. One thing I noticed though, it was cold. Red flags. None of the ovens were on. My pizza wasn't being made. Half the lights were off. We were alone. What's wrong, honey? He asked me. The look on his face when I turned to look at him, it was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen in my life. Serene around the mouth, but looking me up and down with his eyes. Without giving it a second thought, I bolted out of there. Dave lunged at me, grabbing my ankle, knocking me down. But he must have been in his 70s by then, so I kicked his hand away and ran. Ran. I think I ran all the way home, luckily unfollowed. Out of breath and unable to think, a confused jumble fell out of my mouth. But my parents got the gist. He had done something bad. Dave? No, couldn't be. Dave was such a nice guy. Dave this, Dave that. The most heartbreaking thing was, they didn't believe me. Maybe you misread the situation, they said. In anger, I ran upstairs and I phoned the police myself. Between tears and screams, I told them everything that had happened. Now that I'm older, it must have just been my luck Dave had already been accused on several occasions for sexual assault. I was so lucky that the police believed me. My parents, even after hearing about the past accusations, couldn't believe it. Even after he went to jail, they wouldn't believe it. It broke my heart, but I've made my peace with them. They just don't believe me. But you can, right? Please, believe me.